Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to just look at the calendar for a second.
Okay.
It is March 1st, 2026.
Yes, it is.
And, for most people tuning in, that's probably just another Sunday or Monday, depending on the year.
Right.
But if you are working in the tech sector or the arts or really any specialized field in the United States as a foreign national, you know exactly what today is.
Oh, absolutely.
The air is practically vibrating with anxiety right now.
Because it's the opening day of the H-1B lottery season.
Hmm.
It's essentially it's the Hunger Games for professionals.
It really feels like that. I mean, you have these incredibly talented people, right? You've got engineers coding the next AI revolution,
Right.
architects designing skyscrapers,
Yeah.
cancer researchers,
Yeah.
and they are essentially just tossing their names into a giant hat.
It's almost worse than a hat, to be honest.
How so?
Because at least with a hat, you can physically see the slip of paper. You know it's there. There's just a random number generator buried in a government server somewhere.
Wow.
You can have a PhD from MIT. You can have a job offer from Google or OpenAI with a massive salary. You could literally be the smartest person in the room. But if that algorithm doesn't pick you,
You're just out of luck.
you are out of luck. Your entire life path changes based on a dice roll.
And that creates this overwhelming sense of helplessness. It's the idea that your skill, your late nights, your advanced degrees, none of it matters as much as just a random chance.
Exactly.
But today we are going to flip the script entirely because we are looking at a stack of documents here, and it is a very thick stack of source material that outlines a completely different path.
a very specific path.
Right, a path where luck is effectively removed from the equation.
That's right. We are diving into the O-1 visa today.
The famous one.
Yeah, it's often colloquially called the genius visa.
Mm-hmm.
Though, as we'll see as we get into this, that branding can be a bit intimidating and maybe even a little misleading.
For sure.
But the premise is fascinating, especially in the context of where we are in 2026. Because while everyone else is sweating over a computer lottery today, there is a specific cohort of people who are bypassing that random drawing entirely.
They're just skipping the line.
They are walking right up to the velvet rope, showing a specific set of credentials and getting waved right in by the bouncer.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack exactly how that velvet rope works.
Unpack the mechanics of it?
Exactly. We aren't just reading the government brochure here. We are analyzing a really detailed breakdown from a series following actual immigration journeys.
Episode 10 of that series, specifically.
Right, episode 10. And it features specific case studies. We've got Hen, who is a designer, and Marcos, who is an AI entrepreneur.
Two very different profiles.
Completely different. And what makes this source material so rich is that it also gives us a look inside the minds of the people who actually make these decisions. We get the regulatory framework through these key figures. We have a veteran adjudicator named Officer Miller.
The highly skeptical gatekeeper.
So skeptical. And then on the other side, we have an attorney named Sarah.
The strategic guide. She's the one trying to get past Miller.
Exactly. And those characters are crucial because they represent the fundamental tension at the heart of this entire visa process. You have the applicant saying, "Look at me, I am extraordinary."
Right.
And you have Officer Miller, whose literal job is to sit there, cross his arms, and say, "I don't believe you, prove it."
He is paid to doubt you.
He is. So we are going to deconstruct what extraordinary ability actually means in legal terms in 2026. Because it turns out it's not just about being smart. You don't actually have to be Einstein.
No, you don't.
But you do have to follow a very specific, sometimes totally counterintuitive set of rules to get this golden ticket. So let's just get right into it.
Let's do it.
Let's start with our first case study from the source material. Hend.
Okay, so Hend is introduced as an award-winning graphic designer. She
Yeah.
is a creative, and I think that is an incredibly important distinction to start with. Because there is this pervasive myth out there that the genius visa is only for, scientists curing rare diseases or physicists building rockets.
Right. The name Genius Visa instantly summons images of chalkboards covered in math equations and people in white lab coats.
Exactly.
But Hend is making logos. She's building brand identities.
She is. And her motivation is exactly what we just talked about. She wants to avoid leaving her future to a random computer draw.
She wants control.
She wants agency. She wants to know that her future is in her own hands. And this brings us to the agile nature of the O-1, which the source material highlights beautifully.
Let's talk about that agility. Why is the O-1 considered such a powerful alternative to the H-1B?
There are a few major reasons, but the biggest one by far is the cap.
The limit.
Right. The H-1B has a hard statutory limit on how many people can get it each year. Once those spots are gone, they are totally gone. The O-1 has no cap whatsoever.
Wait, really? Let me make sure I have that right. So if 100,000 geniuses apply this year, the government can't just say, sorry, we're full.
Theoretically, yes. There is no quota. If you meet the standard, you get the visa.
That is wild.
It's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Second, there is no lottery. It is a direct, merit-based application. And third, and this is huge for people on a strict timeline, you can apply any day of the year.
You aren't waiting around for this arbitrary March 1st deadline.
Exactly. You aren't tied to the government's seasonal calendar.
That sounds almost too good to be true. I mean, if it's that flexible, why isn't everyone doing it? Why is anyone bothering to stress out about the lottery today?
Because the barrier to entry is incredibly high. This is the catch.
Right. There's always a catch.
Always. The H-1B mostly just requires you to have a relevant bachelor's degree and a valid job offer. The O-1 requires you to prove extraordinary ability.
Which means what, legally?
The legal definition is that the applicant must show they have risen to the very top of their field. We are talking about a very small percentage of professionals.
Top of the field. That sounds so subjective, though. I mean, think about it. My mom thinks I'm at the top of my field.
Sure she does.
My boss might even think I'm at the top of my field if I had a good quarter. Does that count?
Unfortunately for you, Officer Miller, our fictional adjudicator from the source, does not care at all about your mom's opinion.
Shocking.
And honestly, he doesn't really care about your boss's opinion either. Not unless your boss backs it up with hard, undeniable data. He needs objective evidence.
So the burden of proof is heavy.
It is entirely on the applicant. It is not enough to just be good at your job. You can be a fantastic designer, a great coder, a wonderful architect.
But that's not enough?
No. For the O-1, you must be documented as elite.
Documented. Okay, so let's talk about what that documentation actually looks like in practice. Because the source material mentions this 3 of 8 criteria.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like a scavenger hunt. Or a bingo card.
It sort of is a high-stakes bingo card, since most applicants aren't walking into the immigration office holding a Nobel Prize or an Academy Award.
Which would get you in automatically, I assume.
Yes, a major internationally recognized award, like a Nobel, gets you in with basically no further questions. But since most people don't have that, they have to use the alternative path.
The 3 of 8.
Right. They must meet at least 3 out of 8 specific regulatory criteria.
So you don't need to hit all 8.
No, just 3. But they have to be absolutely rock solid. Let's walk through the ones Hend used, because I think this really paints a clear picture of what extraordinary actually looks like on paper to Officer Miller.
Okay, let's do it. The first one mentioned in the source is Criterion A, which is awards.
Right, awards. Now let's look at Officer Miller's perspective here. The source notes a very specific distinction he makes. He says, Employee of the Month does not count.
I want to pause on that because I feel like it trips so many people up.
It really does.
You have people who are genuinely high performers at their companies. They get the spot bonus. They get the President's Club trip to Hawaii for crushing their sales quota. They got the glass plaque for their desk. And they submit that to USCIS.
And Officer Miller tosses it right in the trash.
Just completely ignores it.
Metaphorically, yes. Because Employee of the Month is an internal award. Think about it. You are competing against, what, 10 other people on your team? Maybe 50 people in your department?
Right. It's a small pool.
Exactly. And the criteria for those awards are usually highly subjective. Things like, Hend had a great attitude this month, or Hend worked really late on Tuesday.
Which is nice, but not genius.
Exactly. The O-1 requires national or international prizes for excellence.
So we're talking about industry-wide recognition. You need to be competing against strangers, not the guy in the cubicle next to you.
Precisely. If Hend is a graphic designer, she needs to win something like a Red Dot Award, or a D&AD pencil, or a massive industry accolade where she was quite literally competing against the best in the world.
That makes sense.
The government wants to see that you have been vetted by your broader industry and come out on top. And they don't just take your word for it. They want to see the selection criteria for the award. They want to know who the judges were. They want to know exactly how many people applied from how many countries.
So it's not just snapping a picture of the trophy on your shelf and uploading it. You essentially have to perform an autopsy on the award itself.
That is a great way to put it. You have to prove the award actually matters. If you win a Best Designer award from a local neighborhood knitting club, that's lovely for you, but it's not O-1 material. If you win a national design competition that gets covered by major press, that is.
Okay, so that's the first one. You need a verified, highly competitive trophy. What about the second one? The source material mentions published material.
This is criterion B. And honestly, this is where a lot of applicants get tripped up and make fatal errors.
Hmm.
The requirement is for articles about the applicant in major trade journals or major media.
The key word there being about.
It is a crucial distinction. It is not about articles that Hand wrote herself. It's not a link to her online portfolio. It's not her personal blog.
Right.
It has to be independent journalism written about her and her specific work.
So if she gets a feature mention in Design Week or Forbes, that counts?
Yes. The source specifically mentions publications like Design Week or Forbes as the gold standard here. But there is a massive caveat in 2026 that we need to talk about. We have to talk about the credibility test.
Oh, this is the part about the blog post, right? The source material had that really cringeworthy example.
Yes. Officer Miller gives a very specific, very stern warning about this. He talks about blog posts written by friends. He specifically uses the example of a friend, Bill, writing a post.
Like, hey, everyone, look at my good friend Hen. She's a great designer. Check out her new logo.
Exactly. And the problem is, in the modern age of the internet, literally anyone can get published on a blog or on a user-generated content site like Medium or a LinkedIn article.
Anyone can write a post.
Right. You can also easily pay for press releases on PR Newswire. You can have your buddy write a puck piece on their startup's website. Officer Miller knows this. What he is looking for is editorial independence.
So he's looking for a traditional gatekeeper at the publication.
He wants to see that a real journalist at a real publication pitched an editor, and they collectively decided that Hend was newsworthy.
That she actually mattered to their audience.
Right. If the article looks like a paid placement or an obvious favor from a buddy like friend Bill, it triggers immediate skepticism from the adjudicator.
It's so interesting because it feels like the adjudicators have really had to evolve their tactics to keep up with the media landscape. They know exactly what a sponsored post looks like now.
They absolutely do. You have to remember, they are reading these files all day, every day. They know the difference between a real feature story in Forbes, written by a staff writer, and a Forbes Council post that an applicant paid $2,000 to publish themselves. One of those counts heavily in your favor. The other one might actually destroy your entire case because it makes it look like you are actively trying to fool them.
That is a terrifying thought, that submitting the wrong kind of evidence is actually worse than submitting no evidence at all.
It erodes trust. That's the key. Once Officer Miller thinks you are trying to pad your resume with fluff or fake news, he starts looking at every other piece of paper in your application with a magnifying glass.
Okay, so Hend has an award. She has some real independent press from a gatekeeper. She still needs one more to hit that 3 of 8 threshold. The source material highlights judging.
Right, criterion C.
Yeah.
Judging the work of others. This is a fascinating one to me because it really relies on the natural hierarchy of any given profession.
How so? What do you mean by hierarchy?
Well, just think about who generally gets invited to judge a major competition. Who sits on the jury for the Academy Awards? Who judges the Olympic gymnastics routines?
Usually it's the veterans, the seasoned experts, the people who have already thoroughly proven themselves in that exact arena. You definitely don't ask a junior designer straight out of college to judge the International Design Awards.
Exactly. You ask someone who has already made it. So the government's logic here is that the mere act of being invited to judge is, in and of itself, proof of your elevated status.
Because the industry wouldn't ask you if you weren't top tier.
Right. It implies that your industry respects your opinion enough to let you decide who else is worthy of winning.
So for Hand, serving on a jury for a major international design competition is just a massive golden ticket item for her application.
It is. The source explicitly tells us that in this 2026 context, USCIS views judging peers as a massive indicator of extraordinary status. It shows she has moved from being the one taking the test to the one grading the test.
I love that analogy. Moving from taking the test to grading it, that really clarifies exactly why they care so much about that specific criterion. And there's one more mention in her profile, right? The money.
Ah, yes. Criterion D, significant remuneration.
Which is just a really fancy bureaucratic way of saying she's getting paid a whole lot of money.
Yes. Commanding a high salary compared to others in your specific field. Money, in this context, is used as a direct proxy for value.
It's a bit brutal, but it's objective numbers. You can't really argue with a W-2.
And that is exactly what Officer Miller wants. Objective, verifiable numbers. If the average graphic designer in New York makes $60,000 a year, and Hen has a contract showing she's making $200,000 a year, the government takes that as a very strong mathematical signal that she possesses a unique and extraordinary skill set.
Because why else would a rational company pay that massive premium for her?
Exactly. Unless she's the CEO's niece or something.
Which is why they check all the other criteria too, I guess.
Exactly. They look at the whole picture. But generally speaking, the free market doesn't lie. If you are getting paid like you are in the top 1% of your field, you're very likely in the top 1%.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and look at this from a physical perspective, because we've talked a lot about what Officer Miller wants to see conceptually. But let's talk about what he is actually holding in his hands. The source describes Hen submitting a 300-page portfolio.
I really want you to visualize that for a second. A standard ream of printer paper that you buy at Staples is 500 sheets.
Right.
So we were talking about a physical stack of paper that is more than half an inch thick, submitted just for this one person's visa application. It is a literal doorstop.
And what on earth is actually in there? It can't just be 300 pages of pictures of her logo designs.
No, it's a massive constellation of legal and professional evidence. It's not just a copy of the award certificate. It's the multi-page bylaws of the organization that gave the award.
Oh, wow.
It's not just the Forbes article. It's the official circulation numbers and media kit of Forbes magazine to prove it's a major publication.
That is so much extra paperwork.
It's proof of the salary, the tax returns, the pay stubs. It's formal letters from the directors of the organizations where she served as a judge. It is a complete forensic accounting of her entire professional career.
It sounds absolutely exhausting to put together.
It is incredibly exhausting. And then you have Officer Miller sitting there at his desk, probably with a lukewarm cup of coffee, actively looking for holes in it. He is reading those 300 pages looking for reasons to doubt her.
Which brings us to a really scary concept mentioned in the source material. The RFE threat.
Right, the RFE. That stands for Request for Evidence.
Yes.
Now, Request for Evidence sounds relatively polite, but reading the source, I get the sense it's not a friendly customer service letter.
Oh, not at all. It is a bureaucratic stop sign. It is a literal heart attack moment for the applicant and their attorney.
What actually happens when you get one? Well, if Officer Miller is flipping through that 300-page stack and he sees that blog post from friend Bill that we mentioned earlier, he doesn't just quietly ignore it and move on.
Yeah.
He might issue an RFE. He stops the entire clock on the application and formally says, I do not believe this specific criterion is met. Prove it to me right now, or I am denying this entire case.
So your whole life goes on hold.
Completely on hold.
So the strategy when building this 300-page document isn't just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
That's known as the kitchen sink strategy. And attorney Sarah in our source material knows that usually fails miserably. The actual strategy is to curate the walls so perfectly that it looks absolutely bulletproof.
Because weak evidence actively hurts you.
Exactly. Weak evidence makes the officer question the strength of the entire petition. If you include a fake-sounding award just to pad the page count, he might start doubting the legitimacy of your real awards.
That's a really important takeaway for anyone listening. It is far better to have 3 rock-solid, undeniable criteria than 5 shaky ones.
Quality over quantity, absolutely every time. You want the adjudicator to read the first 50 pages and say, okay, I get it, she's the real deal. You don't want him to read 300 pages and say, I'm still not sure about this person.
Okay, so that perfectly encapsulates Hendek. She is the creative, and she fits into these criteria pretty cleanly once she curates her portfolio. She's an employee, essentially. But I really want to move to our second character from episode 10, Marcos, because his situation seems exponentially more complicated.
It is much more complex.
He's an entrepreneur. He wants to launch an AI company in Silicon Valley.
The Marcos case is fascinating because it deals with a very specific structural problem in U.S. immigration law. Marcos is a founder. He is the boss. He is the guy who's going to be giving out the jobs.
Which you would naturally think is a universally good thing. You'd think the government would say, look at this guy. He's so extraordinary. He started his own AI company. He's going to create jobs for Americans. Give him the visa.
In the regular business world, yes, that is a gold star. But in the immigration world, specifically for the O-1, it is a massive legal problem. There is this pervasive myth in the startup community that you can just sponsor yourself for self-petition for an O-1 visa.
And the source material says that is completely false.
Legally, you cannot sign an immigration petition for yourself. An O-1 is fundamentally a job offer visa. Someone else has to formally offer you the job. You can't just draft a letter offering a job to yourself. It's a legal nullity.
Because you cannot be both the employer and the employee at the exact same time if you are the exact same human being.
Exactly.
So is Marcos just totally stuck? I mean, he owns the company, so he can't hire himself. Does he have to go get a job at Google instead?
Well, this is where a critical piece of the regulatory framework comes in. The January 2025 USCIS update.
Right. The source talks about this update shaping the 2026 landscape.
Yes. For years, founders were in this weird gray area. But the government finally acknowledged this structural problem and officially clarified the workaround. And the workaround is that Marcos forms a U.S. company, a distinct legal entity, and that company petitions for him.
But wait, I'm confused. Let me make sure I understand this. If he owns the company, aren't we just back to the exact same problem? Isn't he just wearing a different hat? It's like, hello, government, I am Marcos the corporation, and I would very much like to hire Marcos the human.
It sounds like a distinction without a difference, I know. But legally speaking, the corporation is recognized as a separate person.
Okay.
However, there is a massive critical constraint that Officer Miller will look for, the employer-employee relationship.
Okay.
To make this legal fiction work, there must be a genuine, demonstrable separation of power between Marcos the individual and Marcos the company.
How on earth do you prove that separation if you are the founder and you own all the stock?
You have to give up control.
Give up control of your own baby, your own company.
Yes. Officer Miller's rule in the source is crystal clear on this. A one-man show usually fails. If Marcos holds 100% of the voting shares and has total unchecked control over the entity, there is no valid employer-employee relationship.
Because nobody can tell him what to do.
Exactly. He can't be hired or fired in any real, meaningful sense. And immigration law says if you can't be fired, you aren't truly an employee.
So to get the visa to run his own company, he has to make himself fireable.
Precisely. The legal solution highlighted in the source material is installing a board of directors. Marcos needs to establish a board that has the formal legal authority to hire him, supervise his work, and yes, fire him if they choose to.
That is just a wild paradox. To get the founder visa, you have to formally structure your company so that you can be kicked out of it by other people.
It is the absolute price of admission. You have to construct a corporate hierarchy where you are theoretically replaceable just to satisfy these immigration rules. You are essentially using your own entrepreneurial success to create the sponsor, but that sponsor must have real teeth.
It can't be a fake board.
Right. The board can't just be his mom and his best friend from college. It needs to be actual investors or independent industry advisors.
Yeah.
People who could realistically sit down in a boardroom and say, Marcos, you are underperforming this quarter, you're out.
I can imagine a lot of ambitious founders really hesitating there. You spend your life building something, pouring your blood and sweat into this AI startup, and the very first step to moving it to America is putting a loaded gun on the table and pointing it directly at your own career.
It is a massive leap of faith. But in 2026, this is the standard, unavoidable playbook for high-growth founders. If you want the O-1, you have to play by these strict corporate governance rules.
It really highlights the huge difference between just being a genius coder and actually navigating the bureaucracy. You kind of have to be a genius at the paperwork, too.
Or at the very least, you have to hire a genius attorney like Sarah from our source text. You need a legal mind who knows exactly how to draft those complex board resolutions so they satisfy Officer Miller's strict requirements without actually putting the founder in immediate danger of a hostile coup.
True. It's a delicate balance. Now, speaking of the administrative and legal side of things, we really have to talk about the cost.
The financial reality.
Yeah, because in 2026, looking at the source material, it seems like the price tag for all of this has gone up significantly. It almost feels like the government is running a for-profit business here.
It really does. We are looking at an immigration system that is increasingly pay-to-play when it comes to speed.
The source mentions something called premium processing.
Right. So let's play this out. Let's say you do all the work, you submit this massive 300-page petition. If you just drop it in the mail with the standard filing fee and wait, that is called standard processing.
And how long does that standard wait take?
The source states it can take up to 8 months due to severe government backlogs.
8 months. If you are a startup founder like Marcos trying to launch an AI company, or if you are Hend and you have a massive design project starting in 3 weeks, you simply cannot wait 8 months. The opportunity is completely gone by then.
It's a lifetime in the business world. Venture capital investors will not wait 8 months for you to legally start working. High-end corporate clients will not wait 8 months for a design sprint. So the alternative is paying what is essentially a speed tax.
And how much is that?
As of March 1st, 2026, the premium processing fee has jumped to exactly $2,965.
Almost $3,000. And just to be clear, that is not paying for the visa itself. That doesn't guarantee you get approved.
Not at all. That is just for the privilege of a fast answer. That is on top of the base filing fees, the asylum program fees the government added, and the thousands of dollars in legal fees you paid to attorney Sarah.
Wow. But what is the actual value proposition there? What does $3,000 get you?
It guarantees that Officer Miller will give you a response in 15 business days.
So you go from sitting in a pile for 8 months to getting an answer in about 2 weeks.
Exactly. For someone like Hend, the source makes it clear this isn't an optional upgrade. She has a project starting. That $2,965 is just a necessary, mandatory cost of doing business if she wants to work in America. It effectively turns the government bureaucracy into a premium service you can subscribe to.
But it definitely creates a stark divide, doesn't it, between the applicants who can afford to buy speed and those who just can't.
Absolutely. It explicitly prioritizes capital. If you have the corporate backing or the personal funds, you skip the line. If you don't, you sit in the backlog for most of a year. It is a very clear message from the system.
Right.
We can work fast, but you have to pay us for it.
Now, there is another huge cost mentioned in the source material that isn't monetary at all. It is deeply personal, and honestly, reading this part of episode 10 made me genuinely angry.
You're talking about the families.
Yes. We're talking about the O-3 visa.
Right. This is the dependent visa for the spouse and the unmarried children of the O-1 holder.
Yeah.
So, for example, if Hen comes over with her husband, Leo, and their kids, they are living here on O-3 status.
And what are the rules for Leo? Because he is married to a person of extraordinary ability, he's probably a very smart, capable professional himself.
The restriction is incredibly severe. As of 2026, despite years and years of intense lobbying from the tech sector and immigration advocates, O-3 spouses still do not have work authorization.
Still, even today, even though Hen is certified as a genius at the absolute top of her field, we are rolling out the red carpet, inviting her here to improve our economy, but we are legally telling her husband he has to sit on the couch.
That is the law. Leo can live here. He can take the kids to school. He can even enroll in a university and study if he wants. But he cannot earn a single dollar of salary. He cannot work for a U.S. company.
That's incredibly harsh.
And here is the real kicker that catches so many modern couples off guard. Generally speaking, he can't even open his laptop and work remotely for a foreign company while he is physically sitting on U.S. soil.
That puts a massive amount of pressure on the family unit. You are essentially forcing them to become a single-income household overnight. And often in places like New York City or Silicon Valley, which are some of the most insanely expensive cities on Earth.
It creates a massive, sometimes destructive dynamic shift in the relationship. Think about it. Hen suddenly has to be the sole breadwinner carrying all the financial stress.
Right.
And Leo has to accept a forced career break. A gap year that might turn into a gap decade depending on how long they stay. It is a really brutal trade-off. It's the government saying, you get to live in America, but only one of you gets to build a career.
It seems almost entirely counterintuitive if the country's actual goal is to attract the world's best talent. You're telling the talent, come here, but your partner has to completely sacrifice their professional identity.
It is a major deterrent. I have personally seen brilliant families choose to move to Canada or the UK instead, specifically because those countries allow the spouse to work.
I don't blame them at all.
But for those like Hend and Marcos, the opportunity in the U.S. often still outweighs that heavy cost. They accept this trailing spouse dynamic because the professional upside for the primary applicant is just so incredibly high.
Well, let's look at that upside then. Because despite all these costs, despite the 300 pages of evidence, despite having to give your board the power to fire you, despite paying $3,000 for faster processing, despite the husband not being able to work, people are still doing this, thousands of them every year.
Yes, they are.
Why? What is the long-term payoff that makes all of this suffering worth it?
The biggest advantage, especially when you compare it back to the H-1B lottery we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive, is longevity. The O-1 allows for indefinite renewals.
Indefinite. That is a very powerful word in the context of immigration. Usually every single visa has a strict expiration date hanging over your head.
It does. The H-1B typically has a hard 6-year limit. After 6 years, if your employer hasn't successfully sorted out a green card for you, which is another massive bureaucratic nightmare, you often have to pack your bags, sell your house, and leave the country.
Just uproot your whole life.
Exactly. The O-1 is fundamentally different. As long as you are still actively working in your field and you can prove you are still extraordinary, you can keep renewing it, usually in 1 year or 3 year increments. Theoretically, you could renew it forever.
So it is a much more stable platform to actually build a life on. You don't have that ticking clock constantly echoing in the back of your mind.
Precisely. Once you conquer that initial 300-page hurdle and prove you are a genius to Officer Miller, the government is generally quite happy to let you stay as long as you keep producing elite work. You aren't watching a countdown clocks the same way an H-1B holder is.
And the source material hints at the ultimate next step, too, what it calls the mountaintop.
Right. The road to the green card. You have to remember, the O-1 is a temporary status, technically. It is classified as a non-immigrant visa, but it aligns almost perfectly with a very specific permanent residency category, the EB-1A green card.
EB-1A. And the source describes that as essentially the permanent version of the O-1.
That is exactly how it is described. It is permanent elite status. The regulatory criteria, the international awards, the major press, the judging of peers, the high salary, they are almost legally identical to the O-1.
Oh, I see.
So if Hen can build a really strong, bulletproof O-1 case right now in 2026, she's essentially laying the exact foundation she needs for an EB-1A application a couple of years down the line. It is a natural progression. You prove you are elite to get in the door with the O-1, and then you just prove you are still elite to stay forever with the EB-1A.
So let's try to pull all of this together. We started with the very specific context of today, March 1st, 2026. The crushing anxiety of the H-1B lottery system.
The path of luck.
Right, the path of luck. And what we have detailed over this deep dive is the complete alternative, the path of proof, the O-1.
And it is definitely not an easy path.
Yeah.
I think that is the main critical takeaway I want listeners to understand from this source material. It requires a massive, almost unbelievable amount of paperwork.
300 pages.
Right. It requires specific, sometimes painful structural concessions, like Marco's creating a board of directors that can legally fire him from his own AI startup. It requires paying very high fees, like that $2,965 speed tax, just to get an answer in a reasonable time frame. And it requires painful family sacrifices, like the O3 work restriction for spouses like Leo.
But the end result of navigating all that pain is control. You aren't just sitting at your desk waiting for a random computer server to pick your name out of a digital hat. You are forcefully pushing the door open using the weight of your own credentials.
Exactly. It is a meritocracy. But we have to be honest, it is a highly bureaucratic meritocracy. It rewards those who know how to strictly document their success, not just those who quietly achieve it.
Which brings us to a final thought I really want to leave you, the listener, with today. We've used the word genius a whole lot in this conversation, the genius visa. But looking at these strict rules, the awards, the press features, the high salary comparisons, it feels like we really need to redefine that word in this specific context.
I completely agree. In this bureaucratic world, genius isn't just about raw, innate talent. You can literally be the most talented graphic designer or AI coder in the entire world, just hiding in your basement, making absolute masterpieces.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the published press, the recognized awards, and the high salary to prove it, Officer Miller does not care. To the U.S. government, you simply do not exist.
So the question I want you to mull over is this. In a world where you eventually have to prove your worth to a skeptical government officer just to enter the room, are you building a career that looks good on paper, or are you just building one that feels good to do? Because the O-1 absolutely demands the former. It demands a career that is highly visible, meticulously documented, and constantly externally validated.
It really is the stark difference between doing the work and being recognized for the work. The O-1 forces you to chase the recognition just as hard as you chase the craft itself.
Something to think about the next time you are updating your LinkedIn profile or archiving your latest project. Are you feeding your soul, or are you feeding the portfolio? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the O-1 visa. We will see you next time.